Hello, everyone. Welcome to Examining Evolution. I'm here with Speed of Sound from Answers in Atheism, and he requested that we do this show. He's kind of tired of the accusations that I make about evolution and saying that it's a story that is believed rather than a scientific fact as it's often presented. So, Speed wanted to come on and just discuss this. Is evolution just a story, or is there really hardcore science backing this up that this is something that people should accept as a fact? So, welcome, Speed. Do you want to say any more about this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wouldn't that dichotomy between fact and science, that sort of thing. Uh, yeah, I guess they call evolution a fact, but fact is yeah, it's a term that it's one of those gradient terms that people don't exactly. I don't know. I don't like fact. I like theory. Theory is good.
Okay.
That's sound theory. And of course, you would say just a story or just a theory. And the first thing I wanted you to consider is that I have often called your belief in a sky daddy or your belief in resurrection and the Bible as just a story or a myth, a children's story, that sort of thing. So when I say that your belief in Christianity is just a story, a children's story, what effect does that have on you?
None at all.
Oh, you have no emotional reaction at all to somebody.
No, not at all.
Okay,
it
so
is a story. It is a story.
Right, so you're not in touch with your feelings, are you? But a lot of people get really irritated with that.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a story that I happen to believe is true. But I acknowledge that I can't prove to you that this story is reality.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I would hope from people who choose to believe the story of evolution, that they would recognize that they are choosing to believe a story, and they may have reasons for believing that story, just like I have reasons to believe the Bible. Right. I don't expect anyone else to believe it.
But the thing is, when you say just, the word just, 4 letters, right? Mm-hmm. Just a story, just a theory, there's a discounting attitude to that, right? So, like, if your belief in Christianity, you probably read the Bible from one end to the other, and you've done a lot of research, and you have a lot of reasons why you believe what you believe. And if I say, "Oh, that's just a story, Rebecca, that you want to believe," I'm sort of discounting you and discounting all the work that you've done in order to put together why you believe in that story. Because I don't think you just heard the story one time and said, "Oh, yeah, that's right." I think it was probably a little deeper than that, right? You thought a little bit more about it, wouldn't you say?
I would say I thought quite a lot about it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you tell a biologist or molecular biologist it's just a story, and you're basically discounting it, and that's no way to start a conversation. So, I mean, everything is a story. Everything that we do in life is a story, right? I have a story that I can tell myself about what I've been doing all morning. Okay. And if I were to convey that to my son, I would have conveyed it as just a story. So everything is just a story. So we have to understand that. So that in no way detracts from the theory to say it is just a story. Okay. But now scientific theories work with methodological naturalism. And methodological naturalism requires that every step of the way is possible, that we can show in a laboratory that each little tiny step is possible. Okay, we have to show that it could happen. Okay, and we're not talking about probabilities, and I know creationists love their probabilities, but we'll get to that. But anyway, every single step when you come up with a scientific theory has to have a naturalistic proof behind it, that we know that we do have facts. Okay, we have a fact that You mix vinegar and water, and you get vinegar and baking soda, and you get carbon dioxide. You wouldn't deny that, would you?
No.
Okay, why? Why wouldn't you deny that?
Well, because you've made observations, scientific observations and experiments that show that
Right.
that's what happens, right?
Yep. And
Mhm.
like what would be a good example? I'm trying to think of one. But anyways, so we've worked out the chemistry of that, and we've measured it, and we've come at it from like 15 different angles.
Right.
So we know that chemistry does what it does. We know a lot about chemistry, right? So
Right. So that's not a story, right? That's
oh,
that's
but
like
but it's kind of a story because there are no real atom balls. Okay, when you look down at the quantum level as to what's going on in an atom, there aren't really atom balls. This thing that we imagine atom balls with electrons spinning around them, that's not the truth at all. It's much deeper than that. But we come up with a story, and the story works to explain the facts. And if we want to go deeper and start looking at quantum mechanics and orbitals and all of that, then we can look at that too, right? So we just add more to the story. But yeah, it's just a story because we've seen very few atoms. I think they've got some instruments where they've managed to get a cloud, but that is a story too.
So you're saying there's no difference between the theory of evolution and then experiments that we can do with chemical reactions.
Correct.
Well, I have a big problem with that, Mike.
Yeah, you do
Because evolution is something that you're telling about history, right?
Mhm.
So it's you first of all, you said every step of the way we should be able to, with our observations show that this can possibly happen, right? But first of all, we haven't done that. So quite the opposite.
Okay.
And so if you want to back that up with facts, I'd be happy to hear it. But that's my first problem with what you're saying. Second of all, something being able to possibly happen doesn't mean that it did happen.
Okay.
And so, right? And so when we're talking about evolution, we're talking about an origin story. Now, even if it could possibly happen, it doesn't mean it did happen. And so it's very difficult to show with current observations what happened in the past. But there are some observations we can make, right, that could give more credence to that story. The problem is so much has actually confirmed the opposite, that story is incredibly implausible. So it's something that is believed in spite of the incredible and I would say insurmountable difficulties it faces.
Okay. So, but I see it entirely differently than that. And I've studied this stuff for going on 20 years now almost. Not evolution itself. I spent a lot of time in neuroscience, probably evolution for the last 6, something like that. And I see that every step of the way is plausible, is possible. Okay, probable. That is an entirely different discussion, right? Methodological naturalism shows what can happen, and we've shown that every step of the way can happen. Okay, now if you pick one particular species, and we're talking about the history of that species, like for instance, chimpanzees splitting off from humans, right? Okay, if we look at that one, we don't know exactly when it happened. We don't know if somebody fell out of a tree, if somebody ate a bad banana. We don't have all the historical facts, but we do have all of the steps along the way scientifically that we know that it could have happened. Okay, that there is a way. Like if I took your genome before when you were just a zygote, and I made little single nucleotide changes in that genome all along the way, and split a chromosome, and then made changes that you would develop as a chimpanzee, and we know that scientifically. That is a fact. Okay, that's a
Of
fact.
course, if you make enough nucleotide changes,
Right.
but where is the evidence that those nucleotide changes happened? So
Okay.
let's get into you showing me that the evidence. If
Okay.
you want
Like,
me to believe it's more than a story, then let's see it.
okay, that they did happen. The evidence that they did
Yes.
happen in exactly the sequence that, we did them in the lab, that sort of thing. Okay, we can't do that. You can't go back in history and figure out what happened first. Okay.
Okay.
But okay, that isn't how we figure things out. Like I use the example of if your car's laying out in the yard or in the lawn and it's all smashed up, and your son is laying in bed and he's fully clothed but looking a little disheveled. He's got grass clippings all over him. You come up with a story about what might have happened. He might have taken the car out last night, banged it up, did some terrible things, and you come up with that story. You don't know exactly what happened until you ask him. But even then, he could be completely making up the sequence of events. But at some point, something has to plausibly explain how that car ended up where it is. And we do that all the time. We find historical stories and we accept it as truth when it makes plausible sense, when each little piece connects up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
going from a common ancestor to a chimpanzee or a human, right? Okay, we have roughly 6 to 13 million years that we split off. So each of those branches would have nucleotide changes, and we have ideas of what the rate of that is from other biological experiments. So we know that those nucleotides can change, and of course we understand natural selection. And there isn't any step of that process that is not plausible, that couldn't happen, that absolutely is impossible. So why would you think any one of those steps was if you have 3.2 billion nucleotides?
Mm-hmm.
We know we could look in the lab and watch one of those nucleotides change from a G to a C. Okay, why would you deny that 100 million of them or 300 million of them could do the same thing over 7 million years of time? So why would you deny
Well,
that part?
okay, because when we're talking about changes that you're mentioning, what we observe, and we call them mutations, right? Changes that happen.
Yep.
Most of the mutations that we observe are either neutral or have a negative or deleterious effect, right? So we don't see coordinated mutations happening that can build structures within organisms. So, what we would need is millions and maybe billions of nucleotide changes, right, that were coordinated in order to create these incredible structures that are in your beautiful cat there, right?
Yep.
And so we don't observe that happening.
We
So
don't
this is the
observe
main
that.
problem. And you said, why would I think it's implausible? Well, I'm listening to people like Douglas Axe. Get his book Undeniable: How Biology Confirms Our Intuition That Life is Designed.
I have
He'll
it
show you
still.
why it's implausible.
I have it
Get The
still.
Stairway to Life by Laura Change Tan and Rob Stadler. They'll
I
show
have
you
that.
why the steps are just completely implausible. So I have a bunch more books here by scientists who strongly disagree with you.
I'm guessing I have every single book that you have, and I've looked
And
at
have you read them?
them. Yep, a lot of them.
Okay, so let's talk about what Douglas Axe
Well,
says in
let me correct that.
Undeniable,
I don't
right?
read them. I scan them.
Okay.
Basically, I scan them for relevant material. So, Douglas Axe. Okay, we're probably going to get down in the weeds of Douglas Axe because I've read
Well,
his.
wait a minute. What I don't want to happen is, oh, this guy's not a good scientist, that guy's not a good scientist, that guy,
Yeah,
because if all you can do is attack the person, then that's a problem. Attack
right.
the idea. Tell me why his ideas are wrong.
Okay, Douglas Axe did 2 papers One of them he did in, God, I forget when it was. He did a recent paper where he found the improbability of a protein being created de novo, basically, coming out of the blue, that sort of thing. And that paper was the one that's normally cited. He also did another paper about 4 years before, when he was actually doing work in biology, molecular biology, and he's done some really great work. And the man is capable of doing better than that second paper. And in the first paper, he found that 25% of whatever mutations they threw at this protein still created a viable protein, that it still worked. So 1 out of 4 worked. Okay. And then in his second paper, he come up with this number 10 to the 73rd or something like that. And that one was not a good paper, and it was not done well. It was when he crossed over into the creation camp that basically you are so convinced by. These people are putting out these books, they're coming up with these little one-off things, and they're not analyzing any one of them seriously, because I've taken each one of them and analyzed it seriously and found fault with it. And we can with anything creationists throw at us. Created heterozygosity, this garbage about ERVs that Standing for Truth is putting out, all of that stuff has been completely dismantled. Nathaniel Jensen, his stuff, if you watch Dr. Dan, I mean, we can take down each individual part, but it takes us weeks to take down one individual part, because the story is a lot more complicated than that. So, but
okay, well, and Standing for Truth is going to be here on the 16th, by the way, to talk about ERVs. So I'm looking forward to that.
It is so bad. It is so bad. Talk about just story. Okay, he has a story, but he can't back any of it up. His story is the Weig hypothesis, or the Weig variation-inducing genetic elements, or something like that. And he believes that ERVs were just stuck. You really think Standing for Truth knows anything about molecular biology?
I do.
Oh my God. Okay.
But see, here we go. Let's stop attacking the person. Just bring me your arguments, Mike.
No,
so choose something that you want to show me today. If you want me to believe that evolution is more than a story, then you've got to bring the evidence. You've got to bring, things that will help me to see your point of view. Right now, we're just talking vaguely. So I'm ready.
I'm trying to figure out why is my camera not working? Hang on a second here. Settings, we got something wrong. See if that works. Does that work? Oh.
It's a raccoon.
Yeah.
Okay.
It proves evolution.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I put up with every night when I don't feed my raccoons. They climb up on the window. Anyway, so, oh God, where to start? Like I think we need to stay at the top first. Okay, let's skim across top first and figure out what we're talking about. So I'm telling you that each little step of the way, okay, there is a viable organism that can be created. Okay, that is possible, even with mutations. And most mutations, about 90% of them are neutral. They don't really do anything at all, just the way our genome is built, with the redundancy that's built into it. And there's another maybe 8-9% that are 8 or 9% that will kill you, and 80% of all embryos that are fertilized never get to the stage where you even know that you have a pregnancy. Okay, most of those things disappear because of mutations, right out of the, before they even get into the into the womb and plant, right? They die because of mutations. Okay, it's that, and then there's that one-off random chance, which would be a beneficial mutation, which everybody talks about, and that I don't entirely believe in. Okay, what I believe in is that 80-90% that is neutral starts to hook up in networks of molecular, basically molecules binding to other molecules, and they form pathways. And those pathways terminate somewhere and don't really do anything. And then we have a useless protein rolling around in the cell, and it basically gets thrown into a proteasome, turned back into amino acids, and it's gone, right? But then every now and then one of those things will hook up and start to do something. Okay, so now you've got a population of organisms. Okay, maybe imagine 100 or 1,000 or little bugs rolling around, and one of them has all of a sudden has two different pathways for some metabolic product that makes it a little bit faster than the guy next to it. Okay, and this guy exists in a population, well, actually 100,000 or a million, right? He exists in a population, and then that population ends up in an environment where things get a lot tougher. Okay, it's a lot colder, right? A meteor hits or whatever, or something happens that the weather changes for 10 years. And now that thing has a significant advantage over its neighbors, and it creates more offspring continually over the next 1,000 years. Okay, so now all of a sudden that biological pathway is in every single genome in that population. Okay, that's one thing. So that would be a metabolic advantage. There's some metabolic advantage. And that is how natural selection works. It's going to select that thing over and above everything else, and over a number of generations, that population is going to drift into that new way of doing things. Okay.
But Mike, do you see that for like the last several minutes, what you've been telling me is a story?
Yes.
Now, it may be a story that you believe, but it's not a story I believe. So
Okay,
you haven't in your story. I didn't hear you're beautifully confirming, my belief here, because this is what I see over and over again from this community of believers in evolution is very good storytelling. Now, it sounds scientific, but what you said there is just a story. You're not bringing me any evidence to back up your story.
Okay, every step of the story I told you is possible. Okay, if every step is possible, if every step you take across the river finds a stone that you can land on, then you can cross the river and keep your feet dry. And that's what I'm showing you. That's methodological naturalism. And you want me to show you a paper for every little piece? Well, I can show you a paper that tells you how mutations happen, how proteins fold. I could show you that whole story, and I could fill in all the little pieces where you're asking questions. But I told you nothing that's implausible. There's nothing implausible about proteins being created that bind to each other. There's nothing implausible about proteins being duplicated in the genome, so that now instead of one protein, you got two different genes, right? Or one gene, you have two genes. And one of those genes can start to change. It doesn't make any difference because it's neutral. You still have that other protein doing what it does, right? So all of those things are plausible. And you're not even believing basic genetics and biochemistry, because you probably don't understand. Well, the other thing is you got these guys in your ear, Stairway to Heaven, Douglas Axe, whatever. You got to get those guys out of your ear if you're going to talk to a biologist. Okay. There is nothing implausible about what I just told you at all, about two pathways, a pathway that goes to nowhere, suddenly connecting up and going somewhere. There's nothing that can't be shown in the laboratory. Okay. Nothing implausible about that. And you're saying you don't believe that?
Well, I think you're greatly oversimplifying it, because and by the way, I am talking to a biologist today on Bread of Life in a few hours. So please join me for that, guys.
Who are you talking to?
Taylor.
Oh, Snake?
No,
somebody else.
But
okay.
Yeah, anyway, you can check it out.
Yeah, I will.
So, but nothing implausible. I totally disagree with that. Okay. I think
Why?
a lot of what you're saying is implausible.
Tell me
But
the implausible part. Give me some evidence that part of that can't happen.
well,
Okay.
let me just, first of all, you're not being specific. Okay. So we really need to get down to specifics. But what I'm talking about is it is implausible in general. This is what I'm talking about. It is implausible to the point of being insurmountable that random changes, okay, or even changes in a pressure in an environment, it's implausible that these would have the power to build orderly structures, complex systems within organisms.
Right.
Okay. Because you need so many working parts for any system in your body to function that if this was just natural selection at work, those parts would have to be non-functional for so long before they could have a chance of
neutral.
Yeah. Right. But so if we're talking about selection pressure, that's going to work in the opposite direction to building new functions within systems.
Why would it work in the opposite direction?
Look, if you disagree, please show me the science. I'm looking for the science. If you want me to believe your story, show me the science that shows that it would go in the opposite direction. Look, all of our scientific observations show things going in the opposite direction. Nobody wants mutations, right? You don't want your child to be born with a lot of mutations, right? You know that is most likely going to be detrimental. The whole, human genome we're gaining mutations with every generation, and that is bad. We're seeing more dysfunction within the human population. So, show me something going in the opposite direction. Show me mutations that are.
Show me evidence for some of the things you're saying. I mean, you're telling me that it can't happen, but you can't tell me why it can't happen. You're telling me that the human population is going in the wrong direction. Show me evidence. Cancer since 1989 has been going down. Okay, per capita. There's only one cancer that's been going up, and I think it's prostate cancer, and that's because people are living longer. And we're getting more of that. But since 1989, cancer's been going down. Okay, the amount of mutations and let's see, I've heard what is the one? Autism, right? Okay,
yeah,
we're better. We have a different diagnostic criteria for autism, and of course, we're going to find more cases if we widen the diagnosis, but there's no evidence that any of these things are going up in the human population.
Okay. Let me find a list of genetic. I can just look up a list of genetic diseases that are caused by mutations.
Yeah.
I mean,
over and over.
If I need to do that, I will. But show me where we're going. Look, we may be able to change things in our environment, like less pollution, and that will reduce mutations that cause cancer, right?
And this is insignificant. It's not applicable anyway, because species do end up getting themselves in a bottleneck where they go extinct, and humans may have done that because we're not our genome is not under hard selective pressure right now. It could, but I mean, all of these stats that you guys come up with about the human genome degrading, we are finding new genetic diseases every day. Okay, we are.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean that they just popped up now. They've always been here. They've been here for a hell of a long time. We're just identifying more and more of them every year because now we are researching it at the genetic level. Okay, so you'd have to prove that point, but let's not go to that. Isn't going to help us in any way with what we were talking about. Okay, I told you about a scenario where a gene duplicates, where there's one mutation and that mutation ends up being beneficial in the future. Lenski's bacteria experiment with citrate. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened is the gene duplicated. Okay, duplicated, and I think it duplicated without the regulatory switch that shut it off. And he put his bacteria in a harsher environment with just citrate, and they grew better. And that was a mutation. So that was one step where it happens. Okay, so we had one gene turned into two genes, and they ended up being roughly the same. They did the same things, one without regulation, one with regulation. So that was a beneficial mutation for that.
Okay, but was there a new structure, a new system built in, or was this because, from what I understand about Lenski's experiment, yes, there were some things that happened, to the bacteria, but it was all like within capabilities that were already latent in the thing, or like it's not building a new function within the bacteria, right?
Yeah. I didn't bring any de novo protein examples with me. So, because I didn't think we were going to head in that direction, but I'm sure I could find you some.
All right. Sal's here. Genomes decay despite fitness gains. Richard Lenski.
Genomes decay despite fitness gains. Okay, you're going to have to show me a source for that so I can read the context and see what he was talking about. Anyway, yeah, the genomes frequently pare down, in species. They will get smaller and smaller and smaller if they are held in a constant environment. And that's what Lenski's doing, and that's what he's finding. That's one of the things he's finding. I think he's finding, I don't know, Lenski has about 100 papers, and I don't keep up with them. But
now, that experiment has been going on for many years. How many years do you know?
I have no idea. I think he's up to about 100,000 generations or something.
Okay, so we've got 100,000 generations.
Years.
Now, what does that equate to? Like, if we considered 100,000 generations of human evolution, how many changes would have to take place? How many structures, how many things would have to take place within like human evolution during that time? And let's compare that to what has happened with the bacteria. What we're seeing is 100,000 generations and not much has changed, right? Where is all this evolution that's going to build new organisms? These are still bacteria, and they're doing basically the same things, right?
Do you think that's what Lenski's experiment is for, is to build a new bacteria?
Well, what you need for evolution to occur, right? You need new organisms. Right, because you've got to figure out, how did we get to this incredible variety in life? Look around. How many different organisms do we have present now? And if we can't get bacteria to do anything new, if we can't get them to branch off and become new organisms in 100,000 generations, how are we possibly going to get in 4 billion years all the variety of life that we see on Earth?
How many different environments did Lenski use over those 100,000 bacteria?
Well, he's probably tinkered with the environment slightly.
Mm-hmm. No. Okay. Well, he did with the citrate, okay, and he got a result right away. So he did with the citrate, but I'm not aware of him varying his environment for anything else.
Okay, well, why aren't we if you want to show that this grand story happened, then do the experiments that put the different environments, and let's all see it. Let's see this glorious evolution happening, splitting off into other organisms. Let's make it happen.
Okay, you're assuming that that's what Lenski's doing.
Okay,
it's not what Lenski's doing. He's not trying to prove evolution. He already believes in it. Okay, he's trying to show individual intricacies of genetic mutations, basically, in a species over time. So that's what he's showing. He's got all kinds of papers where they've discovered all kinds of things about how it happens, about each step. Lenski is not trying to create new bacteria.
Okay,
He'd probably be really happy if it happened because it would make him famous. But in order for that to happen, like I think those bacteria that you guys think are so weak in Lenski's experiment, those E. coli, I challenge any of you to go drink a flask and put it into a natural environment, any one of his hundreds of thousands of species, and find out if there's something actually beneficial there.
Right. Well, Mike,
I don't think anybody
I
would.
feel like at every turn you're actually supporting my like perspective, right? You're what we're trying to do here in this conversation is you're supposed to be showing me how evolution is more than just a story. But what you've done in this talk with Lenski is you're basically telling me that this experiment that you cited has not shown support for the evolution of organisms into the variety that we see of life on Earth. So what I'm saying is I'm still waiting for you to show me your evidence.
Show you the evidence. Okay. So the evidence is you have a genome. Okay. It starts out in a zygote. There isn't any genome that you can't get to from where your genome is right now. I could turn you into a chimpanzee, a frog, or whatever. That every step of that is feasible. It's possible, right? And then you got to go back and you got to consider, like, what do you guys call it? Deep time. Okay, there's a long time involved, and each little step of an organism developing, like this is an embryo, basically, or a kind of a cartoon picture of an embryo developing, and it shows you what an embryo is at the very beginning, and little tiny modifications in the thing that creates. I'm not sure if you can you see my cursor.
Yes.
Okay. So little modifications in the thing that creates that limb right there, okay, can create an entirely different limb. Like one or two mutations in a couple of genes or regulatory area could create a limb that was twice as long, or that had 8 fingers, or that had 3 fingers, or were the fingers or the muscles hooked up in a very slightly different way. So all of that we know is possible because we have done that in the lab. We've taken very, very small changes and we've made changes in the structure. Now, to create something useful, I don't think any embryologist ever does this. They never try to create a new kind of limb. Okay, what they do is they try to figure out how our limbs develop, right? But then looking back to when this little pod right here was a fin, okay? And you don't want to mistake fingers for the rays on a fin because that isn't how it happened. But looking back to where it was just a little bit of like a circle that flapped up and down and swam through the water. Okay, the steps to go from that to a complete human limb, every single step of that is feasible, and there's a pathway where it would have been functional. And there isn't anything about that is impossible.
Well, Mike, remember, we're not talking about what's impossible, or we're talking about what happened. And you're trying to show me that this story that you believe happened. And I'm saying I'm not going to believe the story unless you give me evidence. And all this that you're talking about with the development of the embryo, and okay, if we could tinker with this and that and we can change it. Yeah, but what you're talking about is changing things that are already present. You're starting with something and you're saying we could do this and this to it and make a change. I'm saying, how do you build it from the ground up by chance and natural processes? This is not something that you can demonstrate. That is a story you believe. You cannot show me how these structures got built from the ground up with the processes that are proposed by the theory of evolution, right? Show me how mutations build an arm from scratch.
Okay.
Show me how they build a fin from scratch.
Okay, so you want me to show you every single stepping stone exactly as the person traversed the river, okay? Because you don't believe that a person can get across the river and keep their feet dry. And that's what you're asking me to do. And you're asking me for an immense story. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey in evolution. I ran into basically a roadblock about 5 years ago, I think it was, where I started looking into these embryos and these little guys. Those are primitive gill pouches on human beings, by the way, or pharyngeal ridges. We don't call
Okay, now that is just, I mean, that is this
right
is
right there.
totally
There they are.
not true. This is not true at all.
Okay, prove that to me that it's not true. You
Well,
see this?
you've got to show me that it is true, okay? Because
You see this?
those points all develop into things that are pertain to humans, right? So show
They
me.
do now, yeah.
Okay, but where is your scientific evidence that those were once gills?
Okay, we know that apoptosis is possible. We know what the pathways in a cell, what pathway a cell goes through in order to kill a cell, right? So we know that those little ridges there, that they can actually die off to the point where they have holes in them and they become gills. Okay, and that's what happens in a fish. And we can look at the very, very subtle differences in the genomes, in the developmental genomes, that will turn that into a real gill. Of course, there would have to be a lot of other changes along with it because we've come a long way since we breathe that way, right? But I mean, those are actual pharyngeal arches that are the same as what develops in a fish that creates the gills. And one of these here creates our ears, and the other one creates our jaws and bits of our face. But in a fish, it's an entirely different thing. Well, in fact, in fish, looking back, we have a pathway where one of those gill slits turned into the jaws of jawed fishes. Before, there was a time when fish did not have jaws. We have fossil records of fish that don't have jaws, and one of those gills turned into the lower part of the jaw. So those things have basically modified in fish evolution. So we know that, and we know all of the steps along the way. And you want me to show you every single step, Rebecca? Really? Today?
Hey, I don't, you know what, Mike? I don't even need every single step at this moment. I'm asking you to show me, like, one, show me how how a human eye evolved. Show me how human skin evolved. Show me how, just pick something, like pick something and actually show me the science.
Okay.
Because actually, I love what you're doing right now, because you're actually like promoting my view. You just told another evolutionary story, right? But you still haven't shown me the science. You're looking at an image and you're just telling a story about it, right? But I have a different story that I already believe. So, you're going to have to do better than that to get me to believe your story.
Right. So I was telling you about my journey, or the wall that I ran into with evolution.
Mm-hmm.
It was embryogenesis. I didn't believe that an embryo could develop from an egg. Okay, because I had no idea how it happened. I didn't have any idea how these limbs were formed. So I had no idea how one single cell could end up forming a limb like this, right? So I spent roughly 3 years out of the last 5 looking into how that happened, right? And for me to tell, so you want me to tell you everything I learned in 3 years in 20 minutes?
Well, but now you're talking about a process that we can observe happening,
Right.
and that has nothing to do with evolution.
Okay.
Right. So now you're asking me if you want me to, if I want you to describe this process that I totally already accept. Obviously, we can, discover what happens if we observe, the development of an embryo. But what we can't do is look back in history, right? So but these are two totally different things. Don't tell me what's happening now. Show me how this thing was built from the ground up in the past. That's
Okay.
what you need if you want me to believe that this is more than a story.
Okay. But first of all, you have to understand how you get from one egg to a limb in order to understand how the story happened. So, what do you know about that? So, do you understand how an egg turns into an arm, basically, or grows an arm?
I don't understand every step of that process, but
Okay.
I know that happens, right?
Okay.
Because
it's essential that you don't have any misunderstanding about how this happens, because what happens here is that, okay, you've got a body, basically, goes horizontally, and you have something called Hox genes, and there's a set of about I don't know, 12 of them or whatever, 6 to 12 depending on the organism, and those Hox genes basically start to shape that body from head to toe. Okay, and then somewhere along the line, about maybe a quarter of the way down, one of those combinations of Hox genes that turn on with mechanisms that we understand and know about, right? Turns on at a certain concentration, and then it pops out a little tiny apical ridge, it's called. Apical ectodermal ridge, AER. And that's kind of what this is a cartoon picture of it. Okay. And then from that, a limb grows. And when the limb grows, it takes those same Hox genes, and it grows its limb from one end to the other. So the same Hox genes that grew your head from head to toe grows your limb from shoulder to fingertips, right? The same thing.
That's incredible.
And we understand all of it. We understand not all of it. There's a lot of questions yet that we have in embryology that we're working out. But in order to make any one of these things at a different angle or a different size or a slightly different shape requires a very, very small change in a genome. Okay, one little, like Lenski's bacteria, one little change in a regulatory area, and we can end up with a humerus that bends instead of goes straight, right? Or a different way for this muscle to hook up. But now, if you were to look at how this thing develops in detail, if you were to look at embryology in detail, you could spend your entire life just studying how the humerus was formed. That's how complicated it is, okay? But there are very, very small changes that can have very big effects in the structure of that limb. And that's how we
no doubt about that.
So what I'll do for you, or what I wanted to do for a long time for everybody, is show you that as much as I can about the developmental pathway from a fin to a limb. Okay. And if you saw how that was possible in evolution, would you believe in evolution?
No.
From what?
Because you're talking about.
You asked me for evidence, right? Okay.
Not possibilities. You said if I showed you the possible pathway.
Right.
I mean, I could imagine thousands of possible pathways right now, but that doesn't make them reality, right? If you're going to call this science, then you have to demonstrate it. You can't just talk about possibilities. I can create 1,000 stories. So what's the difference between the possibility you're going to show me and, the story I already believe?
Okay, how would you demonstrate going from a fin to a limb? What would that look like? What would I show you that would demonstrate that to you?
Well, I mean, I have no idea what you're going to try. You're probably going to You're probably going to show me a long string of letters that represent the, nucleotides, and then you're going to change some of them out and be like, okay, now here's how we could get a fin if this changed, this changed, this changed, this changed, this changed, right?
How much time you got?
Well, you said we were going to go for an hour, so.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm wondering what would demonstrate it to you if I had an aquarium and some frogs crawled out after I stirred in some chemicals, that would demonstrate it. What do you ask?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Put some chemicals. Great.
you're,
That would be a great demonstration. Absolutely. If you could put chemicals in an aquarium, stir it up, and then frogs, bam. Hey, I'd believe.
I would believe in God if you could do that. Because that's the only way you're going to do that.
But there you go. And that is why I believe God created. Because you're not ever, even if you put those chemicals in an aquarium for billions of years, you're never going to get frogs out of them.
Okay, that's just what you believe. That's a story you've been told. Okay, that's just what you choose to believe.
That's what my observations about the world tell me. That's what scientists tried for so long to prove spontaneous generation, right? And they gave up on that because it wasn't happening. So I certainly don't expect to, open up a jar of jelly and have a frog hop out or anything else.
Yeah, so not without God. But apparently God, that's how God did it, right? God just basically opened up a jar of jelly and a frog hopped out. Okay.
That's the story I believe, but I'm not calling that science. So I'm fine with you believing in evolution as your story of origins, but you haven't given me a scientific reason to accept that as my story of origins. I like my story much better.
Okay, a scientific reason would be showing you how chemistry works, showing you how each little individual atom works, right? Okay, now if you were to say, I don't believe that a leaf can pop out of a tree without God.
That a what can pop out of a tree?
A leaf can pop out of basically you got a little branch.
Okay.
And in the spring, a little bud forms and a leaf pops out. Okay. If I told you that I didn't believe that and I asked you for proof of that, how would you prove it to me? How would you show me a leaf popping out?
Well, I mean, we could demonstrate it. We could sit there and watch that. We could take it. We can take the branch to, the lab and examine it, and we could pull it apart and show you what's in it that's capable of doing that. And then we can go back out to the forest and we can sit there and watch it. And we can actually observe it happening, right?
Yeah, so that's not how it happened. It happened magically. Okay, you're just telling me a story about how it happened. Okay, you're telling me a scientific story about how it happened. I don't believe that. I believe that magic did the leaf. That the only way that a little bud turns into a leaf is by an intelligent designer with little fingers moving each little individual leaf and building each leaf as it went. I don't believe it. Show me the evidence that it happens naturally.
Yeah, well, we can't. That the difference between, I don't know how you think you're drawing an analogy here with evolution, because with what you're talking about, we can actually demonstrate that the seed, or that this branch is capable of budding, and that this is, we can observe the natural process.
Okay, we see it moving, we see it unfurling, but prove to me that that's not magic. Prove to me that that's scientific. Show me that it's scientific without telling me a story.
Okay, Brandon says, I think we need to clarify what your claim is. So what's happening here? Because I feel like this is getting a little bit kind of...
Okay, I don't believe that a stick can grow a leaf. Okay, I can see it happening, but I believe it happened magically. Okay, that there had to be an intelligent influence on that leaf that shaped that entire leaf, just like I would build a table, something that shapes it. I don't believe that chemicals and molecules and proteins can do that. Show me how it happens. Give me scientific evidence that it happens.
Well, do you think that we can show that? Do you think, okay, if now step out of that belief, like, be a scientific observer, could we demonstrate that this isn't happening, or like the normal process by which this is happening?
Okay, we could we could start learning about how cells divide, and then we could look at the genome of the plant, and then we could try to figure out how it forms that little curl, that is a leaf forming, and basically, like, without an intelligent designer, how does a leaf get chopped up so that it has edges? I mean, it's all folded into one little tube at first, right? How does it end up getting those little spiral lines that cut it in half? I mean, I don't believe any of that. If I don't believe any of that, how are you going to show it to me scientifically?
But
I
do
don't
you
believe
see
it.
what you're doing, Mike?
I'm
You
turning
keep
the
giving these
tables on
analogies,
you.
but no, you're not, because you keep bringing up examples of things that we can actually observe, and you want that to be analogous to evolution, which we cannot. Well, if you have the observations that show that structures can be built in organisms and produce the complexity and variety of life we see here, I'm ready to see it. But that's something we don't have. But you're wanting to make the observations that we do have analogous to that, and it just doesn't work.
Okay, but we don't observe every step of a leaf unfurling and turning into a leaf. We do it by learning as much as we can about each individual step and looking at what's plausible. Okay, at what can happen. We look at each individual tiny little step, and if you were to look at a leaf developing, like I say, you could spend your entire life on one leaf, watching one leaf develop and laying out everything that makes it happen. But you still can't prove to me that all the leaves on the tree happen that way, or all the leaves on all the different trees happen that way. Like, what about popple trees? I mean, sure, you showed me how an oak tree developed, but what about popple trees? I don't believe that those things. I think those are magic. You may be right about this oak tree. Do you understand what you're doing with science? Do you understand if you were
No,
to, okay, if you
I
were
mean,
to,
I understand what you think I'm doing, but
okay,
I feel like you have failed to give me scientific evidence for the story that you believe. So, I mean, I'm still waiting to see that.
I'm still waiting to see scientific evidence that a leaf develops without magic. I want you to show it to me. Show it to me. What's it going to look like? The thing is, Rebecca, if you were to look at how a single species of plant like an oak tree, okay, evolved from some common ancestor way back, okay, if you were to show one single species and you started writing out all of the things that you're asking me to show you, all the scientific evidence, right, about how it happened, you would end up with a stack of books that probably reach from here to Saturn or more. That's how complicated this stuff is. And you're asking for each individual step. Well, I can show you fins to limbs, I think, in broad strokes, but I could show you how fins could evolve into limbs.
But you're showing me possibilities, and what I'm asking for is actual
Well,
observational evidence
prove to me.
that shows that mutations are capable of building new structures within organisms. So, do you see what you're doing? You're trying to take me to possibilities, and I'm asking for observations, because that's what science is, right?
So you can observe the past. So you've been known to have scientific evidence of what happened from the moment you were a little girl to now. You can give me that?
Well, no, but that's the problem, right? With the theory of evolution, is that it is a story about the past, and that makes it much more difficult to show experimental evidence for, because we cannot repeat it. Now, what we can do is, if these processes like mutations are actually capable of building complex structures within organisms, then we could do experiments that could demonstrate that here and now. Now, I have not seen the experiments that show that that can happen. I've read a couple that people have proposed, like, okay, algae grouping together, yeast doing some stuff, and and then the bacteria one with Lenski. But what I don't see is the grand changes that are required for this, amoeba to antelope to happen.
Right. In order to see that, you would have to see that each step of the way is plausible, right? Like if I told you I didn't believe that you were ever a little girl, that you're just telling me a story and I just don't believe it. I believe that you just happened last Thursday magically. Okay, that there's no way that Rebecca could have ever grown from, something tiny to something big. If I told you that, how would you convince me that that really happened? You'd basically point out other babies growing right now. We can see babies growing, and you'd show me each little step of the way. So you'd show me plausibility in these tiny steps. So if I showed you plausibility in how a fin turns into a limb, why would that not be enough for you to understand that fins evolved into limbs?
Because that's totally different. And actually, what I would do to prove to you is I would bring forward witnesses. I would show you pictures of me as a little girl. We could do facial recognition, right? There are lots of things that I could do to show you and give you good evidence that I was a little girl. But I've been wanting to ask you this question. This is from Brandon. Why do you think we can literally extrapolate from observed adaptations to evolutionary novelty?
Because everything we do in science is done with methodological naturalism. And what we have is we have a starting point and we have a result, right? And in order to prove that we can get from the starting point to the result, we have to break it down into every single step that we can get there. If we have compound A, B, C, D, and we turn it into compound Y, okay? And it's a process. It has 30 steps to the synthesis. Okay, we have to show that each step can happen. So then what we do is we go to the laboratory, say we're looking at step 6, we get purified chemicals and we get clean labware, and we show that you can get from step 6 to step 7. And if we've shown every single step of the way, then we have a scientific theory that we would call a fact. Okay, we know that it is possible to get from A to B or A to Y. Whatever.
Okay, so let's see the steps. Let's do the steps in a laboratory. Let's watch that. Let's watch that develop. Right.
That's exactly what they're doing. That's what the millions and millions of papers that are being produced right now are doing.
Well,
they're showing
if that is true, then why aren't you bringing that to this discussion? Why are you telling me stories?
I can't nail you down on something that you want to see now. I asked you going from fins to limbs. Is that good enough? Okay,
you told me, you said you would show me a possible path.
Yes, and that's all you're ever going to get with history. You could show me a possible path about what you did yesterday. I don't have to believe you. I can say, I don't believe Rebecca. I just don't believe it. Even though it's plausible that that's what you did yesterday, I can just deny it. Okay, if I show you a possible path, then you have to accept that it could have happened.
Well, that it could have happened.
Could have happened.
That doesn't mean I'm going to accept that it did happen. Well, you would need much more than just showing me a possible path.
Because Stairway to Life and Douglas Axe and those books that you're reading, want to show that it couldn't happen.
Exactly. Right. And I believe that.
Okay, so, now you're spinning me. Okay. You just said if I showed you that it could happen, okay, that wouldn't be enough because you want to know exactly how it did happen. Okay. We can never show you how something did happen. If you look at a geological formation, okay, and you're looking at a particular mountainside, and there's like an intrusion of some volcanic material, and there's some quartz and all of that stuff, and I come up with a whole plausible scenario about how that mountain could have arisen, right? You're going to say, oh no, you showed me that it's possible, but you haven't showed me what did happen. You haven't showed me exactly what color the volcano was, what day of the week it was on. You haven't showed me everything. So and you're not showing me exactly how it could have happened. Okay. And that isn't how science works, Rebecca. That isn't how we are curing cancers today. Okay. We're not doing it by going into like the utter detail of exactly what did happen. Okay, we have plausible scenarios, and plausible scenarios are methodologically, through methodological naturalism, are what we accept as science. And that's how we've moved forward as a species. Okay, we're doing the same thing with evolution. We're showing you how something could have happened, how it is plausible, what a lot of the individual steps are, but we can't tell you that that's the exact pathway it took. Nobody can. You can't go back in time and figure out, did it take fork A or fork B? I mean, if you walk diagonally across the street, I can't prove that you went left first or right first.
Right, but if evolution is true, there should be some things that are reproducible about it, right? Like we can't go back and see the exact thing in the past, but we can observe the mechanisms that happen right now. Right. And so if you could show me the mechanisms right now that can develop new systems within organisms, then that would be good support for that story, right?
Every one of those mechanisms we can show you. Okay.
I haven't seen it yet. I mean, I just haven't seen it. Sorry. I mean, show me then. That's
okay. You've got to pick something where you want to see it, and then you have to decide in what kind of detail you want to see it. You've circled back to saying all I have to show you is I have to show you a possible path. You're not telling me that it has to be the exact path. You're doing double speak on me right now, and you don't even realize you're doing it.
Yeah, I don't, because I think I'm asking you to show. I'm asking you to show that the proposed mechanisms, okay, the main mechanism that is proposed for development of new systems within organisms is mutation. So what I would need to see is real observations of mutations building new systems within organisms. Okay. What you suggested to me is something different. You suggested to me that you were going to tell me a possible story, a possible pathway of changes that could be made to an organism. That is something completely different than what I'm asking for. So this is totally, I'm not, changing it up on you. I'm asking for actual evidence. But we're like past, we're past an hour.
Right. Okay.
So I'll let you have the final word. So
okay. So what I propose is if I can show you a plausible pathway from fins to limbs, okay, and I can drill down into sufficient detail, and if I can't, then you have to give me a day to get the detail that you want. If I can keep coming back with detail, then you haven't disproven evolution. Okay, I can show, but you got to pick something. You can't be all over the field. So if we just think about how did a fifth limb evolve into a frog limb, that would be a really good, good proof for you, right? Plausible proof. I couldn't show you exactly.
If I answer that, then we're just going to be going in circles because I've already answered that.
Oh, you're going to tell me you want the exact history of how it happened. Okay,
that's not what what I said is you need to show me that the mechanisms proposed, okay,
can do
what you're saying they can do.
God, if you
you need actual observations for that.
You would have saved us a lot of time if you had just admitted that in the beginning instead of going down this history route that I have to show you the exact history. I don't have to show you the history. I have to show you plausibility. Okay, that's how science works, plausibility. You can't look at history. When you do a reaction in the lab, you can't go back and say, show me all the molecules and what they did. Oh, I'm sorry, I've already got the product, right? I can only show you conceptually how it got from A to B. Okay, and you keep going back and saying, "Oh, that's not good enough." You want me to actually show you it happening. Okay, have you ever watched paint dry? Have you ever observed paint dry?
Um,
You
I
can't
mean,
observe paint dry.
I don't know if I've specifically sat to watch paint dry, but I've seen,
Well, okay,
paint
go
dry.
paint a
Yeah.
wall. Go paint a
Hmm.
wall and sit and watch it, and then get back to me when you see the part where the paint dries. When you observe the part where the paint dries,
Okay.
think about it. Think about it. Anyway, okay, we've got.
Anyway, thanks for being here, Mike. Thanks for everyone in the chat. I've loved your comments. You guys have been great. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
And
guys. I haven't
eh,
kept up with comments. I will take a look at them. So
okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
okay, bye, Rebecca.